Someday you're going to be my favorite ex-wife. Here's your look at the new McFarlane toys as the Mortal Kombat, Johnny Cage, Hollywood Hunk. Johnny Cage was a struggling Hollywood action movie star who wanted to get his fame back. Originally, he entered the Mortal Kombat tournament to display his fighting skills and to prove himself to skeptical movie critics and the movie viewing public, as they believed Cage was nothing more than an actor who relied too much on stunts and camera work and not really a proficient fighter. Eventually, he became one of the most important defenders of Earth. Despite his materialism, airheadedness, and occasional immaturity, Cage has always been a brave and loyal warrior of Earthrealm, although his antics frequently annoy his allies. First thing we're going to do, didn't mean to startle you there. First thing we're going to do, though, is figure out how tall Johnny Cage stands. I'd also like to send out a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys who were nice enough to send this sample my way. If you are interested, by the way, to pick these ones up for yourself, you should be now seeing them circulating comic book stores. Nonetheless, according to the trusty tape measure that I hold in these hands, these digits of mine, the digits for Johnny Cage seems to be at 7.9. Might have even been just a little less than that. And centimeters, that works out to be 20 centimeters exactly. That's not bad at all. What's not also bad at all is the accessories they include for Johnny Cage. He comes included with a display stand. Long-term collectors of McFarlane's stuff will probably recognize this display stand as being the same frequently used one that they used with all their other figures, except for the fact, of course, that Mortal Kombat is adorning the bottom section of the stand, which, of course, the other figures, the DC Multiverse figures and all that other fun stuff, will have their own unique calling card located down below. Nonetheless, though, it's the same stand, and the same stand that you can display the figure atop of if you want to get to more dynamic poses. You know, I'm all about that. Other accessories that come included with Johnny Cage, he comes with a smaller version of Johnny Cage with Johnny written across the top. And though it doesn't have any articulation to speak of, I actually kind of thought for a split second that he would have had some hinging abilities in his elbows. He doesn't actually, doesn't have any little bit of articulation. It's basically just something that he can hold in his hand, which almost sounds like a bit of a segue. You're right, it does sound like a bit of a segue. He does also come included with the Excellence Award for Best Actor, a nice little prestigious award that he could be displaying on his mantle, or why not, just take it around with him and shove it in the faces of his combatants to let them know, a friendly reminder, if you will, that Johnny Cage is the best actor alive. Of course, self-proclaimed. You can see down below they've even put in Excellence Award Best Actor. Small details like that certainly become well appreciated, certainly from this collector's standpoint. Overall, just a nice, neat-looking award. The bottom on the underside is completely hollow. I mean, I don't expect this to be filled in at all anyways. I mean, if anything, you're just going to be displaying it like this. It also serves as a good place to kind of support it slightly by putting his hand just a little bit on the bottom. But he can also grip it. I'll show you guys that in a second as well. And then the last thing, the smallest of things, and most likely, probably could easily say the most fragile of things, he comes with his pair of glasses. Now, coloring on the glasses, I feel in the game, are more blue than they are purple. They went the route instead of going purple. But nonetheless, it's a nice pair of shades that you can display with the figure. A couple of different things you can do with the figure. I'm kind of toying around with some potential ways of displaying him. If you so wish, you can certainly take those glasses. You can kind of put them in his hand. Kind of like that. Kind of like that. Kind of like that. There we go. And you can display them like he's just taking them off. You probably want to have that a little bit more angled up. Of course, the other go-to, and you want to be just very careful of this, as they are certainly small, and something potentially losable. Losable, is that a word? You can put the glasses into Johnny Cage, onto Johnny Cage's head, and display him like that. The nose sort of brings the glasses a little bit more forward, leaving them a bit on an angle, but it's enough to cover over the eyes. I think from the front it distorts it slightly, but does a good job of polishing and finishing things up nicely on the sides there. So those are all the accessories that come included with the figure. I don't know if I would have added much more to that. They certainly could have given him that kind of green energy effect that they could have had wrapped around his leg, but it sort of kind of encompasses Johnny as a whole. So I don't think it's something you could have just simply attached in one area, 2 areas, 3 areas. Before you know it, you'd have to have energy constructs, a whole box of them just on the side to attach to the figure. Now this is the Johnny Cage Hollywood Hunk attire, so you can see he's sporting a really snazzy and, if you ask me, quite arrogant looking jacket. I like that it's got a nice metallic sheen to it. It does a good job of reflecting the light. Paint on this is really nice and clean. In the game, I feel like this section, and I'm not going to do that with every single aspect of this figure, but there's a few little color choices where I feel like this on the side was a little bit more of a lighter purple in the game, and I feel like his pants were a little bit more of a more dark gray than black. But everything else is well put together on this particular figure, right down to the fact he's got JC, Johnny Cage, up at the top there. The material that they've decided to go with for the jacket is a more of a softer rubber plastic. Sort of peeling it back, though there's not going to be areas that you're going to be seeing on the figure, you can sort of see how they've simply just used blue pegs on the inside there with Johnny written across his chest. There's areas like that you wouldn't have seen, but I feel the need to point that out to you, just in case you're wondering. Just overall really happy with how the jacket turned out. I mean, I'm pulling away interest from talking about his face, which I'm really happy with how it turned out. Maybe a bit more of a smile could have gone an extra mile for Johnny Cage, but overall just a really clean sculpt on the head. Paint is really done well. Paint-wise, really done well. It's enough of an arrogant smirk that works for Johnny Cage, but yet a bit more of a smile, I think, like I said. Could have just brought that arrogance up a few notches. The continuation of color from his head to his neck to his chest to his torso is, for the most part, something that matches. The neck doesn't seem quite the same color as his face, as his chest, and as his abdomen section. It seems like it's the one little bit of coloring here that's slightly off. But from a distance, it's not enough to, where you see it, you're like, oh, neck seems off. No, that's not the case at all. Again, I like the print that they did on the Johnny tattoo there, written across the front of his chest. He's got a good amount of articulation to this guy, which we'll talk about in a second. He's got his white wrapped up bandages taping on either side, where you can see that there's a little bit of pink on there, wondering if that's actually supposed to be more blood than anything else. The pants themselves have a nice natural baggage to that. Not baggage carrying over things from its past, but certainly natural way that the pants would bag are present here on this figure as well. In a way, I'm a bit disappointed, and this kind of goes back to the more talking point of his articulation, that a full-blown splits is not something you can pull off of Johnny Cage. I thought maybe, if anything, I could probably support that somehow. I mean, that's as far up as the legs really go. You can bring the legs the way that they really should rotate, kind of more this way, but as you can see, it pulls less away from it being a more realistic splits. You sort of have to kind of fudge it a bit by bringing the legs forward, a little bit more forward this way. But it's not, again, enough to get a full flat splits on Johnny Cage. So again, you may want to find yourself maybe like a little clip or something that you could put underneath that. It would have been awesome if they actually had included a clear stand with like just a little supporting clip. So you can actually have had Johnny Cage in a somewhat splits. I don't know why I'm using quotations for that, somewhat splits. You got the Cage written across the front there in a nice metallic silver. Overall, again, really nice clean paint on Johnny here. If the shin guard's done in a nice blue, you've got the very bright white sneakers with accent colors of green, purple, and blue. And then you've got the peg holes on the undersides of his feet. So yes, you make use of that display stand. If they're going to include it, give some clever pose that you can put Johnny in. Speaking of poses, let's talk about his articulation. His head rotates all the way around. So thrilled that they afforded as much articulation on these guys. He has a secondary ball joint at the base of the neck, so you can move the head quite a bit around this way. The upper torso, same idea, good generous amount of articulation. And then he has the same thing going at the bottom of the torso. You can see how it's moving by the fact that his belly button is there and then disappears. And it's there again. He has a double ball joint. So basically, ball joint here and a ball joint down below. The arms hinge outward. way past, surprisingly, what I thought would be a stopping point. They're a little bit more than a 90-degree angle, just slightly a bit more than a 90-degree angle, and you can rotate the arms all the way around. It's clever the way that they basically just put like a rubber overlay for this part of his jacket over top of his arms that leaves enough clearance, and the material is soft enough that it doesn't restrict at all moving on the arms. Again, you can rotate those all the way around. He has a swivel at the top cut of the bicep, right there where it attaches to the sleeve. Obviously, as things go, with striping running down the sleeves, it's going to look a bit disjointed as you rotate the bicep, but not enough that it's going to drive you crazy. It's not going to drive me certainly crazy. Double hinge on the elbow. Nicely concealed. You can see the way that that kind of folds up, packs up shop rather cleanly and nicely there. And then the hand rotates all the way around and hinges back and forth, back and forth. As for the legs, we've already discussed the leg conundrum, but yeah, you can't pull off a full splits. With Johnny Cage, there's really not a lot of figures on the market that you could pull off a full articulated hinge joint, unless essentially you'd have ball joints right here, and you had enough of a gap where basically the sculpt started here, which I'm glad it doesn't, then you could probably pull off a greater successful splits. But I mean, at the risk of what that would look like if you had the legs completely straight, I would rather forfeit that little bit of splits that Johnny Cage can pull off in favor of a better looking clean sculpt from like this section of his waist to the continuation in his legs. Johnny Cage also has a swivel at the top section of the thigh, basically where it's attached in place. He has a double hinge on the knee, and then his feet rotate back and forth, up and down. And then, in case you were wondering, just in case the question was thrown out there, yes, he does have toe articulation as well. How cool is that? There's a lot to like for Johnny Cage. Usually he was a go-to for me. Kung Lao, surprisingly of all things, I mean, we're not looking at Kung Lao, but Kung Lao and Johnny Cage usually were my guys I went to when it came to picking players. I like that he has the Hollywood stud look with his jacket. I wonder if we may get ourselves... Actually, in the game, obviously, he has various different attires. I'm wondering if McFarlane Toys will dabble with the idea of giving us exclusive for Johnny Cage. I know we have exclusives for, like, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. I'm wondering if we're actually going to get the same case for Johnny Cage. He's definitely a neat-looking figure. Again, the prospects of getting multiple versions of this guy in his different outfits does have me rather intrigued with where this line is actually going. I think when the time comes to finally display Johnny Cage on my shelf, I'm probably going to be displaying him doing what he does best, gloating. He's doing a whole bunch of gloating. Got the trophy in his hand, and might I also say here in Final Looks, I was able to get the trophy quite easily into his hand. A small, narrow part around the knee area of the statue fits best in the grip section of Johnny Cage. The only thing that is missing here in Final Looks is his little action figure. I'm sure it's nearby, and he's willing to sign it for you if the price is right. Speaking of the price is right on these pieces, I might commend also McFarlane Toys that they released these figures at a very manageable price points. Some of the figures here in Canada have skyrocketed closer to $40, and yet McFarlane Toys keeps their figure lines, like their DC Multiverse, for example, around $25 to $28. The Mortal Kombat being a little harder and not as circulated to various retail stores here, I think in Canada, sit around closer to $34. So again, really nice sculpted figures at an affordable price, and they have a lot of articulation. It's a shame, really, that Johnny Cage can't pull off his splits, his move that he's best known for. Still, though, for the fact that you would have to be able to sacrifice the sculpting in his legs to be able to pull that off, I'm more than happy just to display the figure like this and not put him in his iconic splits pose. Just a really neat looking figure all around. Did you manage to pick up Johnny Cage for yourself? The Hollywood Hunk is available, like I said, now in comic book stores. I didn't call him the Hollywood Hunk. Well, I did, but it's self-proclaimed. He wants you to know he's the Hollywood Hunk. He is available, as I said, though, in your local comic book stores and many places like Target and stuff like that, which we don't have here in Canada. So he should be easy to come by if you're looking to add this one to your collection. Again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys who were nice enough to send a couple of Mortal Kombat pieces my way. So as you probably guess it, there's a whole bunch of Mortal Kombat reviews lined up coming soon to this channel. So keep your peepers peeled for that. If you are interested in following the exploits of this humbled reviewer through the various different things that I review, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you turn on the bell notification. And make sure periodically you're heading on over to the homepage, because that's the best place to find out if there's anything that you may have missed. And all future videos will, of course, be found there as well. As always, guys, thanks for watching. and I'll see you guys next time.